Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel where today I thought I would answer the most asked question that I get. I get asked in the comments, I get asked in general life, I get emails about it. But before I get to that, I'm going to do a quick, very quick commercial. This book is one I've written. It's called La Belle Communauté. And while it is French for the beautiful community, I assure you it did not take place on some swanky, weird back street of Paris. It is a story about dementia, what else? But it's written, I call it semi-autobiographical fiction. Not everything happened to me that's in this book, but it's in story form that you may find very entertaining and also educational. The link is below. On to the most asked question I get. I will give you the short answer, the long answer, and my own personal tangent, and I will warn you when the tangent comes, so if you want to hop off, you can do that. And the number one question I get is, am I afraid of getting dementia? Number two, is my husband afraid of getting dementia? Number three, am I afraid my husband's going to get dementia? Okay, that was three questions, but you get the point. They're all the same theme. The short answer, no, it doesn't bother me. I don't stay awake at night. I've gotten beyond worry and fear of things in life in general. And I just don't, neither does my husband. The second thing that comes into play here is we aren't our family. We aren't our parents. As you know, if you followed this channel for any length of time, my mother had systemic lupus. They know that it causes brain fog in the early stages, but they know that the last stop for that is in the central nervous system and brain, and you are more likely to get dementia than the average person. It's kind of a given. On my husband's side, same thing. There were medical issues that I personally believe, and he does too, led to their dementia diagnosis. They both had some real serious issues with circulation and heart and some other things I won't get into, but they very likely, that's the cause. We do not know for sure. No one ever investigated any farther than brain scans. No one told us, hey, it's Lewy body or whatever. They never did. The last thing I'm going to say is I also look at, I understand there's a genetic component to this. And in my family, I have 8 or 9 aunts and uncles that are blood related. Because I have such a big family, I have probably 25 first cousins, and I can't even count the amount of second cousins that I have. So in, let's say, the 50 or 60 people I know, obviously a lot of my aunts and uncles are dead now. But in all of the people that I know, including my grandparents, like, no one has the disease. And they lived, longevity is big. My aunts and uncles, with a couple of exceptions, all lived well into their 80s and early 90s. Both my grandmothers lived in their 90s. And for those who died younger, it was kind of a lifestyle issue. Heavy smoking had a lot to do with more than one of them. So how would they have fared? I can't answer, I don't know. But that's me. My husband has a much smaller family, so we really don't have anything to go on. And I don't know, I guess we've just chosen not to live in that type of fear. Now, I'm going to go into my sort of tangent about this disease because I look at things like, is it the chicken or the egg? So when I look at my mom who had lupus, she was on a cocktail of drugs for decades. Decades. Did the lupus cause it? Did the drugs cause it? I don't have an answer, but I do know this. There are drugs. If you are prescribed anything, it would do yourself a favor. Read the fine print and look online and see what they say about how it affects your brain. I know sometimes it's kind of a, like my mother, even if it was true that it was the medication, it's sort of kicking the can down the road. How do you want to feel now, and do you want to take your chances? And I understand that sometimes there's not a lot of options. But I also know that sometimes there are lifestyles that come into play. I used to work with a guy who said, hey, if they ever say you know, to stop eating certain things to lower your cholesterol, forget it, take the pill and eat what you want. You should probably read up on those drugs for cholesterol before you make those decisions. I mean, if it's a lifestyle decision that you can correct, I would personally, I would correct it. That's just me. I do understand that sometimes you have to take things and it's not an option, but I also encourage you, read all the labels, even over-the-counter things where, like Benadryl. They know that the use of Benadryl can cause issues. Something called, I'm going to say, proton pump inhibitors. It's used for acid reflux. You can get them over the counter. Obviously, they give prescriptions for it. I know this for a fact because my mother's doctor told me this. He said, well, I could give her A or B, but this one is known to cause memory issues. I didn't know that. And he said, you know, she's got enough problems, so let's not add to it. Let me give her the other one. These ones that exist over the counter, if you read the fine print and on them, you will find out that more than one will tell you not to take it for more than 2 straight weeks. The reason for that is it begins to affect your memory. Be your own advocate, I guess. Do your own research on those things. The next thing I'm going to talk about quickly comes from my background. I have a degree in horticulture. I had an awesome teacher that taught ag science and pesticide use and handling. So what I'm about to say, I actually have some knowledge of this. I knew it 30-something years ago when I was in college, and now it seems like it's just beginning to come to the forefront. I worked in horticulture. I also worked for the Cornell, I worked a summer for the Cornell Research Department, and we were working on something that had to do with sweet corn. My professor said this, and it's always stuck with me. When it comes to pesticide handling, 1 + 1 = 3. That means if you are mixing chemicals, you're going to spray, and you're going to mix chemicals in a tank. You have pesticide A, and pesticide A on the label, it says acute exposure will cause a severe headache. You have pesticide B, and it says acute exposure will cause vomiting. You mix the two together, you have an acute exposure, and you would expect that your symptoms would be a headache and vomiting. Except that's not what happens. Chemical reactions have occurred, and now what's happened is your kidneys have shut down. That's how chemicals can work. If you take a look at, and let me see, how do I put this? An artificial sweetener that shall remain nameless was approved, is still approved here in the United States, and the way it works is the chemists, it's all about chemistry. They determined the average pH of the human body is in this range. And so when you ingest the sweetener, what happens is a chemical reaction takes place. And something called chelation, which just means a claw, they bind. Something will bind with the poisonous part of the sweetener, and it will just exit your body. It only works if you are within that pH. If you are outside of that pH, you can have a reaction to the sweetener. I'm just saying. Think about that. There are sweeteners that artificial sweeteners that if you go and look them up, they are now figuring out they are causing brain issues. I'm also going to hit on this one pesticide because it's all in the news now, but years ago, some of these things I knew years ago. Let me back up a little bit. The genetically modified seeds that are now planted. Since we began planting them, the use of, I say glyphosate, I believe they say glyphosate, but that wasn't what I was taught, so it's Roundup. The use of glyphosate has gone up 750%. And you can go fact check that. 750% since we started using genetically modified seeds. Now, pesticides break down, most of them will break down in UV rays, and within about 60 to 90 days, supposedly, they're out of the soil, they've broken down. Okay. If you are a commercial farmer and you farm the same fields, even if you rotate your crops, more than likely you will spray Roundup every year in those fields. Constant spraying accumulates in the soil. It doesn't break down like it should. It's in your food supply, and some of the things that get sprayed get used for feed for animals. I'm just saying. What does that mean for us? I don't know. 1 + 1 = 3. Throw in a medication or two and chemicals all over the place, and it's no wonder we've got autoimmune diseases, dementia, cancers, and everything else. Now, glyphosate, Roundup, has been in the news for the last few years. They know it causes lymphoma. But about 15 or 20 years ago, they knew that if you had a dog and you had a company come and spray your yard, like, 3-4 times a year, make your grass nice and green, that dog was something like 6 or 7 times more likely to get lymphoma than a dog that lived in a house that wasn't sprayed. They'll argue, well, humans aren't dogs and it's sort of inconclusive and blah, blah, blah. And I get it, sort of, and sort of not. That's just me. And now they're finding out, gee, it causes cancer in humans as well. So take that for what it's worth. Likewise, I'm just going to throw this little tidbit of information out. The county that I live in several years ago put out I don't know, that was in the paper. It was like cancer types by zip code. And they were talking about how there was breast cancer in some of the more affluent neighborhoods, like higher than the rest of the county. And they thought that was very odd. As I mentioned, I worked in horticulture, I've been a landscaper, a perennial gardener, all sorts of things, and I've gone into these neighborhoods. And one of the things that I saw more than I saw in other places in the affluent neighborhoods was the treatment of the lawns to have green grass and weed-free lawns. I'm not saying anything, I'm just pointing out my observation on that. I'm sure somewhere it all comes into play. And if it doesn't affect us, how do we know we're not inheriting things from the last generation where it's making a genetic shuffle or something in our DNA that we don't realize, but it's getting passed to the next generation? And I don't even know how you would track that stuff. I don't know. But I guess that's it. That's my tangent for today. And I hope you all have a great day.